I'm Rob Port from SayAnythingBlog.com, North Dakota's most popular political blog. I'm here with Paul Sorum, Republican candidate for governor, challenging Jack Dalrymple for the NDGOP nomination for 2012 to run as a Republican for governor on the ticket. We have two challengers in the race, neither the incumbent. Of course, Jack got appointed, or not appointed, I guess he stepped up to his position from lieutenant governor when former Governor Hoeven moved on to the U.S. Senate. And Paul, you think you're a better candidate than Jack Dalrymple. Tell us why.
Well, absolutely. What a lot of people don't know is throughout my career, I've worked for government directly as my clients, or I've worked with them as regulators of virtually every aspect of my work. So I've worked extensively over a 30-year period with state governments, higher education, which is part of state government, cities of various kinds, counties, townships, including the state of North Dakota, various agencies. And from the private sector perspective, I understand what government's all about, how it works, specifically how its finances work.
Let's talk about that for a minute, because one knock on you is that you don't have any experience in government. That's something, and I'm just devil's advocate, but that's a criticism of you that's heard out there, that you're just a guy coming from the private sector that wants to be the chief executive of the state, and you don't have any experience. How do you answer that?
Well, I have extensive leadership experience, and I think it's a very valuable set of experiences I have working with the state of Minnesota, working with the city of Fargo, working with all kinds of cities, especially in rural North Dakota. I'm out there in the private sector understanding the economic situations, the realities people are in, and what they need to achieve. And in order to do those things, you have to have a real clear understanding of how projects should be financed, where the money's coming from, how it cash flows when it operates. I've written so many feasibility studies, significant studies, market analysis, business plans on behalf of, parts of government, whether they're city commissions, local EDCs, whether they are, long-term care type entities within a community. And those communities and those entities all work together. In fact, one project in Minnesota, I had my project got an award for intergovernmental cooperation, which is pretty rare in Minnesota. So I really understand government, but from the outside looking in. And one thing I can guarantee you, Reagan was correct when he said, when government gets larger, the private sector gets smaller. And that's what's been happening in recent years. Our state government is growing, and the spending rates are.
Yeah, I want to ask you about that, because I know that's one thing that's been a theme of your campaign is spending. 125% growth in the state government over the last decade. We're charted for more growth in the future. There doesn't seem to be any slowdown. We just got a state revenue report that has us at over $1.5 billion in combined projected surpluses and reserves. So do you think the spending that we've done so far has been appropriate? How would you change that?
No, I would change it. We need to look at how the state spends money and make sure that every dollar that's spent is spent in a beneficial way for the citizens of the state, not just special interests. There are people that will outline for us that we're probably spending $1 billion, almost $1 billion in special interest spending every biennium.
When you say special interest spending, what are you talking about?
Well, look at our EDs, look at our Department of Commerce. They're giving away tens of millions of dollars to private companies. Some of them multi-billion-dollar companies don't need our money, and we get no measurable effect in economic stimulus from that. It's just like Obama's stimulus plan. He handed out money, it's crony capitalism that we complain about from the White House, things like Solyndra and so forth, almost $1 billion in stimulus spending in 2009, and we don't see any more jobs, and this is going on right in our state. Why are we giving, tens of millions of dollars every year to private companies? Why are we letting our state government pick winners and losers? We shouldn't be doing that. What we should do is put this surplus money back in people's pockets where it will stimulate the economy, where it will raise the standard of living of citizens here. That's where we need to focus our efforts.
There would be some people who would argue that the state's doing pretty good, that we've got a growing economy, we're adding jobs, we've got all this extra money flowing into the coffers, and they would also argue that we've even done some tax relief, that we've cut the state income tax, and that we've cut the corporate income tax. So we've done tax reduction, and things are going pretty well. And they would ask, why should we change leadership at this point?
Well, remember, we still have the highest tax burden on business of any state in the country, with the exception of Alaska. If we have massive surpluses, which is taxpayers' money in government, why don't we become competitive? Why don't we actually have significant tax cuts? I'll give you an example. My opponent says he's enacted $400 million in property tax relief every year. If you know, like I do, my property taxes on my house is much higher than it was in '08 because the assessed value of it automatically goes up pretty much every year. Our property tax revenue is much higher today than it was in '08 before the supposed buy down. The buy down only lasted one biennium. Now the buy down is a spend up. And we don't have $400 million in property tax savings. In fact, ag cropland across the state is going up in assessed value by 32%. Now, if they have a $1.5 billion surplus in the biennium, why are they setting up farmers for a massive tax increase? That's wealth redistribution.
Give us some numbers when you just said that North Dakota is the second highest tax state in the nation besides Alaska.
No, not highest tax. It's the highest tax burden on businesses.
Highest tax burden on
Yes.
businesses. Okay.
Right.
Give us some more details on that.
Well, last August, one of the top 5 accounting firms, Ernst & Young, they completed a study and published it because they wanted to know from state to state if you were going to, drop a business with facilities, with workers' comp, with all the other taxes and all the other encumbrances on it from government, from your community on up to the state government. Which state has the best tax environment for business? Which one has the heaviest tax burden? And with the exception of Alaska, North Dakota had the heaviest. Oh, that's a very respected firm, and that's coming from their Council on State Taxation. This is why businesses aren't relocating to North Dakota en masse. This is why a lot of them, when they start to grow here, they actually move out of state. This is why our college graduates have to leave this state to find a career opportunity, because we are chasing these businesses, literally chasing them out of the state. Yes, we have oil tax revenue. We should use time of prosperity to make North Dakota competitive with other states.
With other industries. Because obviously there's a lot of jobs being created in the energy sector.
Yeah.
But what you're saying is lower taxes so that some of these other sectors are attractive as well, so that all our eggs aren't in one basket. Is that a fair summary?
Right. Now that times are prosperous, this is the time to change state government using conservative policies that have worked every time they've been tried to level the playing field instead of picking winners and losers with economic development money, which has never generated any significant economic growth that we can prove. Why don't we have sort of the gardening effect? Why don't we make sure it's fertile ground statewide for every person, every opportunity? The way to do that, lower our tax burden on businesses, lower the tax burden on individuals. That $1.5 billion surplus is, again, that's wealth redistribution. That money should be back in the pockets of taxpayers because they need it. And this economic crisis is hurting people in North Dakota. It is. A lot of people have been hurt. They need that money in their pocket. Why is the state just spending it?
Let me ask you this question. We have, switching gears, we have issues in higher education in North Dakota. Obviously, the Dickinson State thing, we're all aware of it. At the time that we're recording this, we're awaiting an audit report from the state auditor's office that everybody is expecting to show a pretty grim picture of some things that went on at Dickinson State University. I think there's other problems without the university system, with spending, with use of taxpayer resources, with sort of maybe an attitude that I would describe, I think, as favoring enrollment growth over perhaps quality education, maybe a quantity over quality attitude. Again, my opinion. Yet, in the state of North Dakota, the Board of Higher Ed, or the Higher Education Administration, is, per the Constitution, separate from the rest of the state. But something that you and I have talked about before is that you feel that the governor could have a greater role in that. Explain that for me.
Well, first of all, I want people to know I was in higher education for more than 10 years, first as a student at NDSU, then as a graduate student researcher at Ohio State, and then as a professor at the University of Southern California. So I really understand higher ed. I loved higher ed. Obviously, I spent a lot of time there. The big thing about higher ed, it's all about students. We need to make the students the customer in higher ed. Quality teaching should be the goal always, not about FTEs. It's not about how much tuition and how much state aid you can crank through the system. That's irrelevant. The mission is to develop the young minds of this state so that the private sector economy has the human resources it needs to be prosperous. Now, having said all that, the governor should have oversight. My opponent had a big role in vetting and appointing the people in place that are running higher ed. He's directly responsible, really, even though, yes, in our Constitution it says it should be a separate entity, but those people in those offices were appointed, and my opponent was responsible for vetting and appointing those in the prior administration. He was a partner in that administration. And I think that needs to be changed. I think they've done the worst thing they could to our university system, which is damaged its reputation. We're known internationally as a university system that gives out fraudulent degrees. It's a horrible thing that was done. These people should be replaced in the leadership role in the higher ed board. I think there are some people in the state that want to do an initiated measure so that we have a statewide elected office in charge, and I think the legislature and the governor's office do have oversight responsibility, if nothing else at the moment, to shine a light on what's going on, what should be happening, and what's not happening. And I think there is a direct line of responsibility, even though constitutionally it's sort of set up as a separate. I mean, the idea is that politics shouldn't affect it, and I agree with that. There's an overarching, sort of natural principle here, which is we should care. All levels of government should care about the young people of this state, and there's been almost no attention to that fact. The student's a customer. It's all about quality in our teaching. And we need to get back to that. I think the governor has a bully pulpit to say those things, and it hasn't been said. The governor has responsibility to say, here's what's happening. I think here's some things that need to change. It's not right. When they appoint people into that higher ed board, they need to be vetted, and they need to be held responsible. And right now, that's just not happening. If that requires some law change or a constitutional amendment, so be it. But it's got to change because the young people are paying a high price for this.
If Paul Sorum wins the nomination, you go on to the general election, you beat Democrat Ryan Taylor, who's got his party's nomination, you become governor. You're coming into that first legislative session. You've got a budget and priorities to set for the legislature. Give us the highlights, give us the outline of your agenda for that first session should you become governor.
Well, we're already working. We have a team of people working on the state budget right now. I have a binder full of some resolutions and possible statutes that could correct some of the big problems we're encountering right now. And I think the biggest issue coming into it is have a fully prepared budget day one, because you don't have enough lead time going to the first session. I think that what we need to do is have significant tax relief, and we need to scale back our budget to what's reasonable for the 670,000 some people we have in the state. There's just no way.
Let's talk about the budget. You say scale back the budget. What areas specifically would you be looking at reducing?
Well, first of all, it's a big job because we really need to look at what spending is really benefiting people in the state. I feel if it's not directly benefiting people in the state in general, we really shouldn't be involved in that kind of spending, frankly, and we have quite a bit of it. I'll go right back to the Department of Commerce. I just think it's wrong to be giving out taxpayer dollars to private companies when we could do so much more to make North Dakota competitive for businesses just right out of the chute. Just like I said, our tax burden, our regulation. We have very unfriendly workers' comp laws here. We're one of 4 states that require businesses to purchase very expensive workers' comp through the state. We should have a private option. We should have a self-insurance option along with that state option. That's what the vast majority of other states do. It makes it a lot easier to start a small business when you do that. And there's a host of other things that can be changed to make this a much friendlier state for business. And those are the things we need to focus on. Really does start with setting the budget appropriately.
What sort of things, as far as making the state, are you talking like regulations and things like that to make the state a little more friendlier to business?
Well, for one thing, I think we need a lot more transparency. We need to review and have a new vision, not just for the university system, but for the other state agencies that directly interact with businesses. And I know a lot of that interaction firsthand is abrasive, and it is condescending in some cases. And as a small business owner, I'm not going to point my finger and name names. It's just not been business friendly, and we need to turn that around and make it business friendly in this state.
All right, Paul, good luck.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you very much.